Welcome to Lyric Lab Poetry. My name's Martin Jago, and this video is called The Poet's Sandbox. 10 new ideas for your poetry journal. And I've spoken about journals and journaling before. It's a really good idea to have a space on your desktop where you can, organize and play with language and ideas for poems. But it's also good to have a physical notebook. I use these small ones because they're flexible and I can just stick it in my back pocket and forget about it. And then whenever an idea pops into my head, or an image, or even a snippet of conversation I might have overheard in the supermarket, it goes down into the book. And it's not like all of those ideas will turn into poems, but I just find it's a kind of very useful internal dialogue to have with myself as a way of exploring the possibility of ideas and images that may or may not end up in a poem at some point. But the main point of a journal, I find, is just to be playing with language, which is why this is called the Poet's Sandbox. And I'm going to start with a quick story. A couple of years ago, I was working for an organization called Directors Lab West. I'm an alumni of the Directors Lab, which is an organization full up of stage directors and choreographers. And every year they have this kind of annual symposium. And it was during that symposium, in my capacity as one of the steering committee members, that it was my very good fortune to be interviewing the playwright and poet Luis Alfaro. And he's a celebrated playwright whose work's been produced all over the world. He is a master of his craft. So it was very good to interview him. And he's great to interview. You just ask a question and then he's kind of just away. He's just such a gifted, natural storyteller. One of the things he said in that interview was that every morning for him starts pretty much the same way in his office. He has 3 jars, and in these jars he has little balls of screwed up pieces of scrap paper. And in the first jar, he puts his hand in and pulls one of these pieces of paper out at random, opens it up, and on that piece of paper will be the name of a location or setting. So it could be at the beach, down a disused mine shaft in the middle of the desert. It could be in the middle of a forest in Oregon. And then from the second jar, he pulls out another piece of paper, and that is a thing, an object. It could be a broken fountain pen, it could be a beach ball, or a small child's bicycle, red, with stabilizers attached to the back wheel. And then the third jar, which is really interesting, is where he'll find something connected to the situation or relationship. So he'll pull out a piece of paper, open it up, and it will say something like 2 people trying to hide something from each other. And then he will write the scene. Not think, just sit down and write the scene. And I suppose not worried or unencumbered from the demands of writing a scene that belongs to a larger play, how it fits, where it fits, but just free to write. And so I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to adapt that later on in the video. In fact, it will be the last exercise I share with you. We'll do a kind of poet's version of that 3-jar exercise. But let's get underway. And I want to start just with a few basic exercises to help you sort of flex your sort of poetry muscles. And the first one is just simply called the simile switch up. And we're going to just start with a couple of similes that we're all familiar with. Choose between 3 or 5, just write them down in your notebook. They could be, for example, things like, as cool as ice, or as cool as a cucumber, as quiet as a mouse, or as pure as the driven snow. They are, of course, cliched and hackneyed, and we would never use those phrases in a poem, but can you reinvent them? Just sit down and look at the 3 to 5 similes you have and just invent new ones as cool as something else, something that might challenge or surprise us. And try and do that without thinking too much. And if you find yourself thinking too much, then put a stopwatch on and literally time yourself, because what we're trying to do is to get ideas down on the page before our inner critic steps in and tries to organize things too much. So that's the first exercise. This next exercise is a kind of a lead in to what might eventually become a list poem. But I want you to write down 10 lines And you're going to organize these lines on the page. You're going to write 2 lines and then a space and then 2 more lines and then a space and then 2 more lines. So you actually have 5 couplets, although the lines themselves may not be related really at all, except there is one overarching thing that relates them. These 10 lines that I just want you to write down as quickly as you can include anything that's happened between waking up this morning and watching this video right now. Off you go. And they can be totally random. They don't need to be placed in chronological order. It could be that you suddenly remember halfway through the list something that happened at breakfast. It's okay to put it there in 7th place. It's not important. It could be something as simple as there was just a lull in the traffic and I heard the screech of what I think is a Cooper's hawk that circles over this neighborhood. It could be the fact that I walked into the kitchen about an hour ago and then I forgot the reason I'd gone in there. So you should have a list of 10 lines organized on the page in couplets. Okay, nothing poetic, and we're trying to avoid sounding poetic, and we're trying to avoid organizing in any way in the first instance when we're actually at the beginning of the exercise. But now we've completed that list of 10 things, maybe just go back over the list and see if there's anything, if there's a different order to those couplets and to those lines within the couplets. If some lines seem to accord more with each other or chime more with each other in interesting ways, and you can just play around with editing the order of those 10 lines. And then leading on from that part of the exercise, we're going to do the whole thing again, 10 new lines, exactly the same as we did before, riffing on anything that may have happened before waking up this morning and watching this video right now. And we can draw, and on our list of 10 lines that we already have, we can use those for inspiration, or we can kind of use the same line again, repurpose it. But this time we have another organizing constraint, and that is that none of your lines, none of them, should or are allowed to include the letter E. I just paused the video so I could do the exercise myself, and I have it right here. I'm going to share it with you, not because it's the superlative example of how to do this exercise, but actually the opposite. Maybe you'll listen to what I've got to say and be reflecting on how you could do a much better job. But anyway, here are my 5 couplets without the letter E. It starts with birdsong and a sharp pain in my ribs, black clouds, a car alarm, and Bob cutting his lawn again. This is couplet number 4. I drink milk, down to pills. And the last couplet, Miriam calls with a sad story about Milo's cat. I wash, cook bacon, think about today. And there you are. What's really interesting about the exercise is that that's not the way I would usually write those lines. I've been forced to write them that way because there's no letter E. And it's a really valuable exercise because it helps us break habits we may not even be aware are there. The natural cadence in our sentence structure, the syntax that we use more often as a kind of default setting. And it's a very, very useful exercise. It also, and I'm going to post a link in the video below, in the comments below, where you can access a link to the poem by the German poet Günter Eich. It's called Inventory, or Inventory if you're American, Inventory if you're British. It's a really good poem. It's just a list poem, and the kind of the 5 couplets you've just created are a kind of list. I want you now to think about different concepts for list poems. Go and check out the Günter Eich poem. In the poem, the speaker is clearly or has been a prisoner. I think this is taken from his experience during the war. And the list of things that he owns, his sole possessions, and they carry so much more weight because there are so few of them, and what they mean to the speaker. It's a very good poem, but it's also a list poem. And I want you to think now about strange ways or curious lists. Just write down 3 or 4 examples. All the cars that have ever broken down on me. I could write a list of all the cars and maybe find a kind of poem in that. All the rainbows I've ever witnessed. And just play with some ideas and don't filter. Try not to filter what comes out onto the page. The next exercise is called sound right. Sound right as in not correct, but right as in write with a pen or tapping away at the keys on your keyboard. You're going to write a few lines, maybe give yourself 10 to 14 lines in which to do this. You're not going to stop as soon as your pen or your fingers touch the keyboard or your pen touches the page. Just keep going. Doesn't matter where these ideas come from, how crazy or how little sense the lines make. But you're just going to play with sounds on the page. So the use of alliteration, birds, beneath the bandstand, breadcrumbs. I mean, just go with different sound shapes. It may be that you're using repetition or rhythm or rhyme, and just keep going until you get to the sort of 10 to 14 line mark, and then just put down your pen. Again, use a stopwatch. If you're finding it difficult and you're taking too long on these lines, then you are filtering too much, and it's a good idea to add a time constraint to get those ideas down before that inner editor appears and starts organizing things. Number 4, I'm looking for my wallet. I don't have much in my wallet. It's a poet's wallet. I tell you what I do have in it. I don't even have any American dollars. I have 5 Canadian from my last trip to Montreal in January this year. And but I know what I was thinking of is not actually in here. I put it in my bedside drawer because that's a safer place for something that's very precious to me. And that's a small note that my son, who's now 27 years old, wrote me when he was about 3 or 4 years old. And it just says, you know, Dad, I love you. And it's, I think it's taped together with bits of sellotape now, Scotch tape. You know, it's very precious to me. So I want you to think about something, an object, a thing that's very precious to you. It doesn't need to be something that's of any monetary value, like my note. But whatever it is, spend a few minutes thinking about what that object would be. Where is it? Do you still own it? Where is it? Is it in the house or apartment that you're in right now? And if not, why not? What I want you to do then is just to write down on the left-hand margin of your page, I want you to spell out the letters of the word for that object. So in my case, I would spell down the left-hand column or margin of my page, N-O-T-E. And that would spell the word note, but not across the line, but down. And now I'm going to use each of the letters to start a line that relates to that note or that object. So my first line, the first word of my first line will begin with the letter N, and then it will continue on to the second line, which will begin with the letter O, and then my third line is going to start with the letter T, and then my final line is going to begin with the letter E. And it may be that I want these lines to be connected in some way. I could enjam the lines so the sentence kind of runs on, or I can make them separate lines. And the only thing I want you to think about here is that the lines can't be completely random. They have to relate to this object that you possess, that you prize. This next exercise uses and explores something called Pararhyme. It's a technique I love to use, taking the sonnet form and replacing the rhymes at the end of the line with this kind of type of rhyme that's called Pararhyme. Pararhyme is using consonants to accord with words in different lines. So for example, I might take the word God, which has the letter G at the beginning and the letter D at the end, and then on the next line I might end with the word good, G, and then the vowel sound has changed, the word's changed, but the consonants at the beginning and the end of the line have remained in place. And of course you can think of many examples: man and mean, bad and bid. And what I want you to do is write a couple of lines, use the couplets again to use this kind of pararhyme. You might want to go back to the list poem exercise where you're just listing things that happen in your morning, and see if you can use this technique. Just write a couple of lines about your morning and see if you can use pararhyme at the ends of each line. There's a really wonderful example by Wilfred Owen, the First World War poet, and it's a disturbing poem called Strange Meeting. And he is just a master of this kind of technique of pararhyme. I like it because when you apply this technique to the sonnet, it gives the sonnet a kind of, when you are eschewing the regular rhyme scheme, you soften the poem, and it feels more like a free verse version of a sonnet, but it's not. I mean, it is, of course, not, strictly speaking, a traditional sonnet form, but you have just subverted it and softened. Often rhyme appears so obvious and hard to our ear that it immediately puts us in mind of the fact that we're listening to a poem or reading a poem, and that can sometimes work against the poem or the story or the image that you're exploring. Pararhyme is really useful because it maintains a kind of element of rhyme, but also subverts it to make it feel perhaps a little more like everyday speech. In a poetry workshop recently, I shared a wonderful poem by Maurice Riordan, an Irish poet, and I'm going to put a link to that poem in the comments below the video. It's called Laudation, and it's a really wonderful poem. Many, if not all, of the lines begin with the same few words of all cities, for example, or of all sounds. And then the poet has completed the line with the speaker's kind of superlative example. Of all cities, I would complete with London, because I think it's just the most fabulous city on the face of the earth. Not that I don't love Los Angeles, but of all smells, of all sounds. So what I'd like you to do is go and find that poem, read it, because it's a wonderful poem. Then I want you to take the poem as a kind of prompt and subvert or challenge what Riordan has down, so you can make this your own. Of all sounds, of all smells, of all cities, and on the poem goes. And just again, without thinking too much, just reach for the first thing that comes into your head when you think of all the cities in the world. So go ahead and have a go at that in your poetry journal. Go and find the poem from the link that I've placed in the comments, and then pull it up on your laptop or on your desktop, and then use that looking from the screen down to your piece of paper or to your Word document, however you're doing the exercise, and just play with Riordan's poem and see what you can find for yourself. Next up, a very quick, interesting, fun exercise, object-verb pairings. Object-verb pairings. So think of some things like, I don't know, a window or a dog, and think about the verbs we would usually associate with those things. So a window opens, a window breaks, a dog barks, a dog bites. You're going to take maybe 3 to 5 things or objects and just write down the verbs that you most commonly use with those things. And then, using the same list, see if you can explore interesting alternatives or subvert the verbs, change them or replace them entirely. A hospital expires, a window questions, and just play with some verb-object pairings, and don't worry too much about where they go or what this means. It's just playing on the page, and because I'm sure somewhere down the line you're going to go back to one of these object-verb pairings and think, oh, now is the right moment to have the window questioning what's happening on the street below. Now is the right time for the hospital to be expiring in this poem about, I don't know, a building that's being demolished or whatever. So it's just about flexing the muscles, this exercise, but a really good one. And you should have a list of about 5 object and verb pairings. I love this next exercise. It is called the syntax shake-up or the syntax swapping. You're going to go and find some examples of the kind of language, style, and syntax that you would associate with, I don't know, a prayer or a Craigslist ad or a recipe, or I don't know, some kind of warning on the side of a gas heater or an AC unit. And you're then going to use that kind of language style and to create a poem. So, for example, you could have warning, take two memories twice daily, do not exceed the maximum daily limit, and just play with this idea of applying the syntax of one of these specific language styles from any of these things, like a weather report, or as I said, maybe a Craigslist ad, and then see if you can use that language to write a poem. So it could be, for example, a poem about a breakup in the style of a Craigslist advert, which might actually be a really good way in, actually, all the things you might have to sell on Craigslist after the breakup. Or it could be, as I said, you could be using the prayer form to talk about your day stuck in Los Angeles traffic. Well, I am literally praying to the gods, please change this light, make this traffic disappear. Let me know in the comments below if you experiment with any of these prompts or exercises, how you get on and what you discover. So much contemporary poetry is rooted in the first person experience and in the pronoun I, and I want to remove all those pronouns in this exercise. Again, you're going to write on a subject or theme of your choosing, and I want you to focus the poem in a physical location, preferably in a building or an apartment or room of an apartment or house. And I want you to tell a story about an emotional energy or center of the poem, but without referring to I. So if you're writing, for example, a poem about grief, it may be the fact that things in that room remain untouched. The person who last used them is no longer with us. Their hairbrush on the sort of vanity, the bed that has been made and has not been slept in, and try to write your poem around the absence of pronouns, and see if you can bring the reader to conclude through your experimentation without pronouns where the emotional energy and center of the poem is. And you can see we're getting slightly more kind of involved now with these prompts, and so I think it's time now for us to revisit the story I was telling at the top of the video. This is exercise number 10. We're revisiting these 3 jars, but we are going to sort of reinvent the exercise for poets so that we're not focused so much on sort of narrative drama. And yes, there is drama in poetry, but we want these 3 things that we use, these 3 elements that we use to help get a poem started, to be more associative. So in this version of our 3-jar exercise, from the first jar, we're going to pull at random, and you can just make this up. If you don't have a jar filled with little scraps of paper with things written on them, you can just pull the first thing that comes out of your head. But the first thing wants to be an image or a setting for our poem. So it could be, I don't know, have a specific smell from an aisle in a hardware store, in the plumbing section. It could be that, or it could be, I don't know, a sort of wind-swept or battered kind of bit of coastline in northern Scotland on the beach that's being pounded by waves. So number 1 is our setting or location. Number 2 is the object or sensory detail. So it could be, for example, an old toothbrush with all the bristles kind of splayed. It could be, I don't know, I just walked around the lake today and very sadly saw there are some egrets nesting high up in one of the trees, and there was a dead chick on the path. Obviously it'd been there for a few days, and it was unsettling. I've just continued with my journey, but it comes to mind now as some sensory detail or object or thing that you can use in your poem. So again, just pull this thing out of your head at random. And then third, and not least, and I'm referring to my notes for this, we want to have the emotional sort of energy or center of the poem. So it could be anything like waiting for a train. Now, I've just made that statement not knowing whether it's a train that you personally are waiting for to arrive or to depart, whether you're meeting someone there or whether you're stepping onto the train. It could be something like, I don't know, inheritance or a windfall. Or it could be something more complex, like, for example, a sentence that says, abandonment mistaken for love. So I'm going to take my abandonment mistaken for love in my third jar. I'm pairing that with the object, I don't know, a deflated beach ball, and then my location, an abandoned mine shaft out in the desert in California. And from those three things, I'm going to try to craft a poem or the beginnings of a poem. And again, it's useful to have a stopwatch for the exercise. It is just that, it's just an exercise, and maybe limit the number of lines or cap them maybe at 20 lines maximum. So there you have the Poet's Sandbox, 10 new ideas for your poetry journal. I hope that you enjoy playing with some of those tools, some of those exercises, and let me know how you get on in the comments below. As always, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for watching. If you've shared any of the ideas in any of these videos, please do direct the people that you've shared them with back to, and give credit to the poet that you got them from, and direct people back to the website, to the channel. It really helps the channel to grow. And so on that, please also do click the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't yet done that. It really helps the channel to grow. And last thing I'll say is I'll be back soon with more poetry content.